On a busy Los Angeles street, Keanu Reeves felt a sharp bump against his side. A moment later, his wallet was gone. He chased the thief through narrow alleys until she stumbled and fell in a dead end. But when he finally saw her face, he froze. She was just a child, 12 years old. Trembling, terrified, she held out the wallet with shaking hands and whispered, "I was not going to keep it. I just needed money for my mom. She is dying, and we cannot afford her medicine." What Keanu discovered next would change everything. He thought he knew about wealth, about poverty, and about what it truly means to help someone in need. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. On the sun-drenched streets of Los Angeles, where the afternoon light slanted hard against glass towers and cast long shadows across the pavement, a man walked alone through the crowd. He moved with the unhurried pace of someone who had learned, over many years, that the world would keep spinning whether he rushed or not. His name was Keanu Reeves, though on this particular day, dressed in a faded black t-shirt, well-worn jeans, and boots that had seen better decades. He could have been anyone, and perhaps that was exactly the point. He had just stepped out of Rosewood Cafe, a quiet little place where he often met with his production team. The meeting had run long, but now, walking beneath the California sun, none of that seemed to matter. These moments of anonymity, of simply being a person among people, were rare gifts he had learned to treasure. The sidewalk hummed with the usual rhythm of the city. Tourists snapping photos, business people rushing past, a street musician playing guitar near the corner. Los Angeles in all its chaotic, beautiful imperfection. Keanu walked past a food truck, nodded to the vendor who recognized him but said nothing, and continued down the block. His mind was pleasantly empty, his thoughts drifting like clouds on a windless day. That was when it happened. A blur of movement, a small body colliding with his. The impact was brief but deliberate, a shoulder driving into his hip, and then the figure was gone, darting away like a startled bird. Keanu stumbled half a step, more from surprise than force, and instinctively his hand went to his back pocket. Empty. His wallet was gone. For a fraction of a second, he stood frozen, processing what had just occurred. Then his eyes found her, a small figure in a dark hoodie, already weaving through the crowd with practiced efficiency. She moved like water through rocks, slipping between pedestrians, never breaking stride, never looking back. Something inside Keanu shifted. He could have let it go. He could have shrugged it off, canceled his cards, moved on with his day. But there was something about the way she ran, something desperate and fierce, that made him move before he could think twice. He took off after her. The chase began on the main boulevard, where tourists scattered in confusion as Keanu pushed past them, his eyes locked on the dark hoodie bobbing through the sea of bodies. The girl was fast, impossibly fast for someone so small, and she knew this city in a way that spoke of survival rather than exploration. She cut left suddenly, disappearing into a narrow alley between two buildings. Keanu followed, his boots pounding against the cracked asphalt. The alley was dim, lined with dumpsters and fire escapes, the walls covered in layers of old graffiti. He could see her ahead, a shadow moving toward the light at the far end. She turned right, into another passage even narrower than the first. Keanu's breath was coming harder now, his chest burning with effort. He was not as young as he used to be, and the years had a way of reminding him at the most inconvenient times. But he did not slow down. Something compelled him forward, something beyond the wallet, beyond the principle of the thing. He needed to know why. The girl vaulted over a pile of discarded wooden pallets with the agility of a cat. Keanu followed, less gracefully, catching his shin on a protruding nail and cursing under his breath. The pain was sharp but brief, and he pushed through it, emerging into a small courtyard behind what looked like a grocery store. Delivery crates were stacked against one wall. A rusted shopping cart lay on its side, and there, at the far end of the courtyard, was a brick wall. A dead end. The girl realized it a moment too late. She skidded to a stop, her worn sandal scraping against the concrete, and in her haste, the strap of her left sandal snapped. She stumbled forward, hands hitting the ground hard, palms scraping against the rough surface. She tried to scramble up, to find another way out, but there was none. The wall was too high, too smooth. There was nowhere left to run. Keanu stopped about 10 feet away, his hands on his knees, chest heaving as he caught his breath. Sweat had soaked through his shirt, and his heart was hammering against his ribs. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was their ragged breathing and the distant hum of traffic from the street beyond. Then, slowly, he straightened up and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was young, 12 years old at most, maybe younger. Her hair was a tangle of dark curls, matted and frizzy around her face, which was smudged with the kind of grime that came from living too close to the streets. Her clothes were old, a hoodie that had once been navy blue, but had faded to a grayish purple, jeans with holes at the knees that were not fashionable, but functional, worn through by time and hard use. One sandal was now useless, and the other was not much better. But it was her eyes that stopped him. They were dark, almost black, and they held an expression he had not expected. Not defiance, not cunning, not the hard, calculating look of a seasoned thief. Instead, there was exhaustion, bone-deep soul, weary exhaustion, and beneath that fear, the kind of fear that came from carrying burdens too heavy for such small shoulders. She clutched his wallet against her chest, like it was a lifeline. Her knuckles white, her shoulders trembling. She did not try to run anymore. She simply stood there, waiting for whatever came next. Keanu took a slow breath, letting the initial surge of adrenaline settle into something more manageable. When he spoke, his voice was harder than he intended. "Do you have any idea who you just stole from?" The girl did not answer. She just stared at him, those dark eyes unblinking, unreadable. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, holding it up so she could see. "I should call the police right now. You understand that, right? What you did is a crime." Still nothing. Her jaw was tight, her lips pressed together, but she made no move to speak or flee. She simply watched him, measuring, calculating, like a trapped animal trying to figure out if the creature before her was predator or something else entirely. Keanu took a step closer. His voice sharpened, frustration bleeding through despite his efforts to stay calm. "What were you going to do with it? Use my credit cards. Buy yourself a new phone. Some new shoes." At that last word, something flickered across her face. She glanced down at her broken sandals, at her scraped palms now slowly oozing blood, and something in her expression cracked. Not quite shame. Not quite guilt. Something more complicated, more painful. And then she spoke. "I was not going to keep it." Her voice was barely above a whisper, hoarse and raw like she had not had enough water in days. There was a slight tremor in it, not from fear of him, but from something deeper. Exhaustion. Desperation. Keanu frowned. "What?" "I just needed money." She swallowed hard, her throat working visibly. "Just enough for something important. I was not going to take all of it. I swear." He stared at her, caught off guard by the rawness in her voice. This was not the script he had expected. Thieves usually had excuses, quick lies, practiced stories designed to evoke sympathy or buy time. But this girl spoke like someone who had run out of lies, who had nothing left but the truth. "For what?" he asked, his voice softer now despite himself. She hesitated, her grip on the wallet loosening slightly. Then, as if making a decision she could not take back, she extended her arms, holding the wallet out toward him. "Take it back," she said. "I am sorry. I did not want to take from anyone. I just did not know what else to do." Keanu did not move at first. He looked at the wallet, then at her face, then back at the wallet. The leather was worn smooth from years of use, nothing fancy, just functional. He reached out slowly and took it from her hands. Her fingers brushed against his, and he was startled by how cold they were. Ice cold, despite the warmth of the afternoon sun. He looked down at her hands, really looked, and saw the fresh scratches on her palms, the dirt embedded under her broken nails, the faint scars on her forearms that spoke of a life harder than any child should know. He opened the wallet and checked inside. Everything was still there: cards, cash, identification. She had not taken anything. He put the wallet in his pocket, his movements deliberate and slow, giving himself time to think. The anger that had fueled his chase was fading, replaced by something more complicated. Curiosity, perhaps, or concern. "You said you needed money for something important," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "What something?" The girl lowered her arms, wrapping them around herself as if trying to hold her own body together. She looked at the ground, then back up at him, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "My mom. She is sick." 3 words, simple words, but they landed with a weight that made Keanu's chest tighten. "Sick how?" he asked. "Her kidneys." The girl's voice cracked on the word. "She needs dialysis, the machine that cleans her blood, but we do not have insurance. We do not have money. The clinic turned us away last week because we could not pay." She paused, swallowing hard. "She has been getting worse. Much worse. I thought maybe if I could just get some cash, just enough to buy her medicine, to get her through another week." Her voice trailed off, and she shook her head. "It was stupid. I know it was stupid, but I did not know what else to do." Keanu stood there silent, processing. He had heard stories like this before, read about them in newspapers, seen them depicted in movies. But standing here in this dirty alley, looking at this exhausted child with her broken sandals and her 2 old eyes, the reality of it hit different. This was not a story. This was a life. He looked at the girl, at the way she stood there expecting nothing, prepared for rejection, already bracing for him to call the police or walk away or do any of the 1,000 things that people with power did to people without it. "What is your name?" he asked. She blinked, surprised by the question. "Ren," she said after a moment. "Ren Holloway. Ren." He repeated it, letting the name settle. "Where do you live, Ren?" Her expression shifted, wariness creeping back into her eyes. "Why? Are you going to call the cops?" "I asked where you live." She studied him for a long moment, her gaze searching his face for some hint of his intentions. He did not know what she saw there, but after what felt like an eternity, she seemed to make a decision. "Not far," she said quietly, gesturing vaguely toward the alley entrance. "A few blocks east." Keanu nodded slowly. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, leaving it there, a silent signal that he was not going to make any calls. Then he adjusted his shirt, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and met her eyes. "Take me there?" he said. "I want to see for myself." Ren stared at him, confusion and suspicion warring on her face. Why? It was a fair question. He was not entirely sure of the answer himself. Maybe it was the way she had held out the wallet without being asked. Maybe it was the cold desperation in her voice when she talked about her mother. Maybe it was simply the fact that he was standing at a crossroads, and walking away felt like the wrong direction. "Because I want to understand," he said finally. "Because you could have lied to me just now, could have made up some story to save yourself, but you did not. So either you are telling the truth, or you are the worst thief I have ever met." He paused, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And somehow, I do not think it is the second one." Ren did not smile back, but something in her posture shifted, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. She looked at him for another long moment, then turned and began walking toward the alley entrance. "This way," she said over her shoulder. Keanu followed. They walked in silence, their footsteps echoing off the narrow walls, 2 strangers connected by an act of desperation and a choice not yet fully understood. The afternoon sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Behind them, the dead end alley disappeared around a corner. Ahead, the city stretched out in all its complexity, a maze of streets and stories, and lives intersecting in ways no one could predict. And somewhere in that maze, a mother was waiting, not knowing that her daughter was leading a stranger home, not knowing that this stranger, this man in the faded black shirt, was about to step into their world. They walked on, and the silence between them, once filled with suspicion and fear, began to carry something else, something fragile and uncertain, like the first light of dawn before you know whether the day will bring storm or sun. They walked through the city as the afternoon light began to soften, two figures moving against the flow of traffic and the rhythm of ordinary lives. Ren led the way, her broken sandals slapping against the pavement with every step, and Keanu followed a few paces behind, watching, observing, trying to understand the world this child inhabited. The streets changed as they moved eastward. The polished storefronts and gleaming windows of the commercial district gave way to narrower roads, older buildings, faded signs advertising businesses that had closed years ago. The sidewalks grew more cracked, the graffiti more prevalent, the faces of the people they passed more weathered by time and circumstance. Keanu noticed the way Ren moved through this landscape. She walked close to the edges of buildings, staying in the shadows whenever possible. Her eyes never stopped scanning, checking corners, noting who was ahead, who was behind. It was the instinct of someone who had learned that danger could come from anywhere, that safety was never guaranteed. No child should move through the world like that, he thought. No child should have to. They crossed a wide boulevard where the air grew thicker, heavier, carrying the bitter smell of gasoline and fried food from a nearby stand. A convenience store with bars on its windows stood on the corner, its neon sign flickering in the fading daylight. The deeper they went into this part of the city, the more Keanu felt like a visitor in a foreign land, a place that existed only a few miles from the world he knew, but might as well have been on another planet. His shoes, once merely worn, were now covered in a fine layer of dust and grime. The hem of his jeans had brushed against puddles he had not seen coming. But he did not complain. He simply followed the girl, letting her lead him wherever this path was going. They turned onto a street lined with low, rise apartment buildings, their brick facades stained by decades of exhaust and neglect. This was East Compton, a neighborhood that rarely appeared in the glossy postcards tourists bought or the movies that made Los Angeles look like paradise. Here, the windows had iron bars. Here, the doors had multiple locks. Here, people lived not because they chose to, but because they had no other choice. A group of young men stood on a corner, leaning against a chain link fence, their eyes tracking Keanu and Ren as they passed. One of them held a cigarette, the smoke curling lazily into the evening air. Another had a skateboard tucked under his arm. They did not call out. They did not approach. They simply watched with the quiet assessment of people who had learned to read strangers quickly and accurately. Ren did not acknowledge them. She kept her head down, her shoulders tight, and walked faster. Keanu matched her pace, saying nothing, but he felt the weight of those eyes on his back long after they had turned the corner. She led him to a narrow alley between two buildings. Stopping at a back door, painted a faded green that had peeled and blistered in the California sun. She tugged on the handle, and the door swung open with a groan of rusted hinges. Without a word, she stepped inside. Keanu hesitated for just a moment, then followed. The hallway beyond was dim, lit only by a single bulb that flickered overhead like a dying heartbeat. The smell hit him immediately, a thick, oppressive mixture of damp carpet, mildew, and rotting wood. The walls were stained with water damage, and in places, the plaster had crumbled away to reveal the old brick beneath. They passed a door, and Keanu heard voices behind it, muffled and indistinct. Another door opened briefly, and an elderly woman peered out through a gap secured by a chain lock. Her eyes met his, suspicious and wary, before she closed the door without a word. The elevator at the end of the hall was clearly broken, its doors wedged permanently open, the shaft beyond dark and silent. Ren nodded toward a narrow staircase. "Third floor," she said, her voice flat and tired. They climbed. With each step, the building seemed to groan beneath their weight. The stairs creaked, the railing wobbled, and the air grew more stale, more suffocating. Keanu noticed things as they ascended, details that his mind cataloged automatically. Cracks running along the walls like spider webs, exposed wiring where a light fixture had been removed and never replaced. A dark stain on the ceiling where water had been leaking, probably for years. By the time they reached the third-floor landing, Keanu's jaw was tight. This was not just poverty. This was neglect, deliberate and systemic, the kind that happened when someone decided that the people who lived here did not matter enough to care for. Ren started down the hallway toward a door at the far end, but then she stopped abruptly. Her body went rigid, her face draining of what little color it had. Keanu heard it too. A voice, harsh and cold, coming from the direction of the door. "I gave you 2 extra weeks. 2 weeks. And what do I get? Nothing. Not a single dollar." A man stood in front of the open door, his back to them. He was middle-aged, heavyset, wearing a wrinkled dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His posture radiated impatience and contempt, the stance of someone who believed his time was worth more than the people he was speaking to. From inside the apartment, a woman's voice answered. It was weak, trembling, barely above a whisper. "Please, just a little more time. I will have the money. I promise. Just 1 more week, Bomb." The man cut her off. "1 more week. You have been saying that for 3 months. 3 months of excuses. I have bills to pay, you understand. I am not running a charity here. By the end of this week, you either pay what you owe, or you and your kid are out on the street." Ren broke into a run. "Mom," she shouted, her voice cracking with fear. The man turned, startled by the sudden noise. His eyes found Ren first, then moved past her to Keanu, who was walking steadily toward them. Something flickered across his face, surprise mixed with suspicion, as he took in Keanu's appearance. The faded clothes that somehow did not match the way he carried himself. "Who the hell is this?" the man demanded, his voice sharp. "You renting out rooms now? Bringing in strangers?" Ren pushed past him and disappeared into the apartment. Keanu stopped a few feet away, his gaze fixed on the man with quiet intensity. "I am a friend of the family," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And I think you should leave." The man, whose name Keanu would later learn was Vernon Cates, let out a harsh laugh. "Hey, friend, look at her. Look at this place. She does not have friends who look like you." He stepped closer, his chin jutting forward aggressively. "I do not know who you are, and I do not care. This is between me and my tenant. It is none of your business." Keanu did not flinch. He met Vernon's eyes and held them. "It is my business now. Are you finished?" Something in Keanu's gaze made Vernon hesitate. There was no anger there, no threat of violence, just a steady, unwavering certainty that was somehow more unsettling than any raised fist could have been. Vernon's bluster faltered, his confidence cracking around the edges. "Fine," he spat, taking a step back. "I will be back. And next time, do not get in my way." He turned and walked down the hallway, his footsteps heavy and deliberate, echoing off the walls until he disappeared down the staircase. Keanu waited until the sound faded completely before turning toward the apartment door. He took a breath, steadying himself for whatever waited inside, and stepped through. The apartment was small, smaller than he had expected, which was saying something given what he had already seen. A single room served as living space, kitchen and bedroom combined. A narrow counter held a hot plate and a few mismatched dishes. A mattress lay on the floor in one corner, covered with a thin blanket. The only other furniture was a worn armchair positioned near the window, where a sheet had been tacked up in place of curtains. A ceiling fan turned slowly overhead, each rotation accompanied by a clicking sound, like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. On a small table near the door, a pile of papers sat in disarray, medical bills and notices, many of them stamped with red letters that did not need translation. And in the armchair, barely visible in the dim light, sat a woman. Rosalind Holloway looked like a ghost of someone who had once been vibrant and alive. Her skin was pale, almost gray, stretched tight over cheekbones that jutted out too sharply. Her eyes were sunken, rimmed with dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights and endless worry. Her hair, once probably thick and dark like her daughter's, now hung limp and dull around her face. Her hands trembled where they rested on the arms of the chair. Wren was already beside her, kneeling on the floor, holding her mother's hand. "Mom, are you okay? He is gone now. He left." Rosalind's eyes, clouded with confusion and fatigue, moved slowly from her daughter to the stranger standing in her doorway. "Ooh," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Who is this baby?" Wren hesitated, glancing back at Keanu with uncertainty. She did not know how to explain, how to put into words the strange chain of events that had led them here. Keanu stepped forward, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "My name is Keanu," he said gently. "Wren and I met on the street earlier today. I just wanted to make sure you both were safe." Rosalind studied him, her gaze flickering between suspicion and something that might have been hope, quickly suppressed. She looked at her daughter, a silent question in her eyes. Wren lowered her head, unable to meet her mother's gaze, while Wren attended to her mother, offering her water from a plastic bottle that looked like it had been refilled many times. Keanu let his eyes move around the room. He saw things that made his chest tighten with something between anger and sorrow. A faucet dripping steadily into a stained sink, the constant plinking of water a reminder of repairs never made. Black mold spreading across the wall near the window, a health hazard that should have been addressed years ago. An electrical outlet with a cracked cover, wires visible behind it, a fire waiting to happen. A window that would not close all the way, letting in drafts and insects and whatever else the night brought. On the table, among the bills, he spotted a small orange bottle of pills. He picked it up, reading the label. Blood pressure medication, the kind used to support failing kidneys. The prescription had expired 2 weeks ago, and the bottle was nearly empty. Beside it lay a small notebook, its pages filled with careful handwriting. Symptoms tracked by date, medication times recorded diligently. A list of free clinics and charity hospitals, most of them crossed out with notes beside them. Too far, no appointments available. Requires insurance. Does not treat kidney disease. This was not just a woman who was sick. This was a woman who had been fighting to survive, systematically, desperately, for a long time. And she was losing. Keanu set the notebook down and turned back toward the armchair just as Rosalind began to cough. It started small, a dry rasp in her throat, but quickly grew worse, her whole body shaking with the force of it. Wren's eyes went wide with fear. "Mom? Mom, what is wrong?" Rosalind tried to speak, but no words came. Her hands clutched at her chest, her breathing turning shallow and ragged. Her eyes rolled back, and before anyone could react, she slumped forward, unconscious. "Mom!" Wren screamed, grabbing her mother's shoulders, shaking her. "Mom, wake up! Please wake up!" Keanu was at her side in 3 steps. He gently moved Wren aside and pressed 2 fingers against Rosalind's neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, but faint, irregular, fluttering like a wounded bird. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, his voice steady even as his heart raced. "I need an ambulance. Medical emergency. Woman unconscious, possible kidney failure. The address is..." He looked at Wren, who was frozen with terror. "Wren, I need the address." She stammered it out, her voice breaking on every word, and Keanu repeated it into the phone. "Send someone now. She is barely breathing." He ended the call and turned to Wren. "Help me lay her on her side. Gently. Like this." He showed her how to position her mother to keep her airway clear, how to loosen the collar of her shirt. Ren followed his instructions mechanically, her hands shaking so badly she could barely move. "Is she going to die?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please, she cannot die. She is all I have." Keanu looked at her, at this child who had already seen too much, carried too much, lost too much. He could not promise her anything. He knew better than to make promises he might not be able to keep, but he could give her something to hold on to. "The ambulance is coming," he said, his voice calm and sure. "Your mother is still breathing. Her heart is still beating. We are going to get her help. But I need you to stay calm. Can you do that for me? Can you do that for her?" Ren nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She took her mother's hand again and held it tight, as if she could anchor her to life through sheer force of will. The minutes stretched like hours. Keanu stayed beside them, one hand resting lightly on Ren's shoulder, the other checking Rosalind's pulse at intervals. The room was silent except for the dripping faucet and the clicking fan and Ren's quiet, desperate prayers. Then, in the distance, a siren began to wail. It grew louder, closer, until red lights flashed through the gap in the window covering. Footsteps thundered up the stairs, and two paramedics burst through the door, carrying equipment and a stretcher. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, attaching monitors, speaking in the clipped shorthand of people trained to save lives. "Blood pressure is dangerously low. Heart rate irregular. We need to move her now." They lifted Rosalind onto the stretcher, securing her with straps, fitting an oxygen mask over her pale face. One of the paramedics looked at Ren, his expression softening slightly. "Are you family?" "She is my mom," Ren said, her voice raw. "What can take one person in the ambulance?" "Only one." Ren looked at Keanu, her eyes wide and pleading, filled with a fear no child should ever have to feel. She did not want to go alone. She did not want to face whatever came next without someone beside her. Keanu did not hesitate. "She will ride with me," he told the paramedic. "I will bring her to the hospital." "Which one are you taking her to?" "Harbor General. Emergency entrance." Keanu nodded. He placed his hand on Ren's shoulder and guided her toward the door. "Come on. We will follow them. We will be there when she wakes up." They hurried down the stairs, past the broken elevator, through the peeling green door, and out into the alley where the ambulance waited, its lights painting the brick walls red. The paramedics loaded Rosalind inside, and seconds later, the vehicle was moving, its siren cutting through the evening air. Keanu led Ren to his car, parked a few blocks away, where he had left it earlier that afternoon, a lifetime ago. She climbed into the passenger seat without a word, pulling her knees up to her chest, making herself as small as possible. As Keanu started the engine and pulled into traffic, following the fading sound of the siren, he glanced over at the girl beside him. Her lips were moving silently, forming words he could not hear, prayers or pleas or promises he did not know. The city rushed past the windows, a blur of lights and shadows, and somewhere ahead, a mother fought for her life while her daughter waited for news that might break her world apart. Keanu gripped the steering wheel and pressed the accelerator, his mind already racing through the challenges that lay ahead. The hospital would need information, insurance, payment. There would be questions, complications, obstacles designed to keep people like Rosalind and Ren on the outside looking in. But those were problems for later. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting there. Getting Ren to her mother's side. Making sure she did not have to face this alone. The ambulance disappeared around a corner, its red lights swallowed by the darkness. Keanu followed, and the night closed in around them, heavy with uncertainty and the fragile hope that tomorrow might still come. Harbor General Hospital rose against the darkening sky like a fortress of fluorescent lights and antiseptic hope. Keanu pulled into the emergency entrance just as the ambulance was backing into its bay, its red lights still flashing in rhythmic warning. He parked quickly, not caring if the spot was legal, and hurried around to help Ren out of the car. She was already moving before he could reach her, running toward the ambulance with a desperation that made his chest ache. The paramedics were unloading the stretcher, Rosalind's pale form barely visible beneath the oxygen mask and monitoring wires. Ren tried to follow them through the automatic doors, but a nurse in blue scrubs stepped into her path. "I am sorry, sweetheart. You cannot go back there. The doctors need space to work." "But that is my mom," Ren pleaded, her voice cracking. "I need to be with her." The nurse's expression softened, but she did not move. "I know, and you will see her as soon as we can allow it. But right now, the best thing you can do for her is wait and let us do our job." Keanu caught up and placed a gentle hand on Ren's shoulder. "Come on," he said quietly. "We will wait together. She is in good hands." Ren resisted for a moment, her eyes fixed on the swinging doors through which her mother had disappeared. Then her shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her, and she let Keanu guide her toward the waiting area. The emergency room waiting area was everything such places always were. Harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. Plastic chairs bolted to the floor in rigid rows. A television mounted in the corner playing news that no one watched. The air smelled of disinfectant and anxiety, and the walls seemed to press in from all sides. They found 2 seats in a quieter corner, away from the crying baby and the man holding a bloody towel to his hand and the elderly woman who sat alone, staring at nothing. Ren curled into her chair, pulling her knees up to her chest, making herself as small as possible. Her eyes never left the doors to the emergency treatment area. Keanu sat beside her, close enough to offer presence but not so close as to crowd. He did not try to fill the silence with empty reassurances. Sometimes, he knew, the kindest thing you could do for someone was simply to be there, to share the weight of waiting without trying to diminish it with words. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. The clock on the wall ticked with mechanical indifference, each second stretching into an eternity. Ren did not speak. She barely moved. She just sat there, watching, waiting, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. The sound of heels clicking against linoleum broke through the quiet. Keanu looked up to see a woman approaching them, middle-aged, with sharp features and hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore the uniform of hospital administration, a blazer over scrubs, and carried a clipboard like a shield. Her expression was professionally neutral, which somehow made it worse. "Excuse me," she said, her voice crisp and efficient. "Are you the family of Rosalind Holloway?" Ren's head snapped up. "Yes, I am her daughter." The woman's eyes moved from Ren to Keanu, assessing. "And you are?" "I am her temporary guardian," Keanu said, meeting her gaze steadily. "Is there a problem?" The woman, whose name tag identified her as Delphine Marsh, Patient Financial Services, consulted her clipboard. "I am afraid there is a matter we need to address. Our records indicate that Ms. Holloway does not have health insurance. Before we can proceed with treatment beyond emergency stabilization, we will need a deposit. $5,000. Ren made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. 5,000. We do not have. We cannot. Delphine's expression did not change. "I understand this is difficult, but the hospital has operating costs. Without insurance or a deposit, we can only provide basic emergency care. After that, we would need to transfer her to a county facility." Keanu stood up slowly, his movements deliberate, his eyes never leaving the administrator's face. "Let me make sure I understand you correctly. A woman is back there fighting for her life, and you want to talk about money?" Delphine met his gaze without flinching. "I am simply explaining hospital policy, sir. These are the rules that apply to everyone." "Rules," Keanu repeated, his voice quiet but edged with something that made Delphine take a half step back. "A 12-year-old girl is sitting here terrified that her mother might die, and you come over to discuss payment plans." Something flickered in Delphine's eyes. Recognition, perhaps. She looked at him more carefully, and her professional mask slipped just slightly. Wet? Are you? Are you Keanu Reeves? He did not acknowledge the question. I will pay for everything. Whatever the treatment costs, whatever she needs, I will cover it. Now please, let the doctors continue their work without any more interruptions about deposits. Delphine hesitated, her clipboard lowering slightly. I will still need you to fill out the financial responsibility forms and sign the insurance waiver. Bring them here. I will sign whatever you need. But if something happens to that woman while we are standing here discussing paperwork, I promise you that every news outlet in this city will know exactly how Harbor General treats its patients. The threat was delivered calmly, almost conversationally, but it landed with the weight of absolute certainty. Delphine's lips pressed into a thin line. She was not used to being spoken to like this, that much was clear. But she was also smart enough to recognize when she was outmatched. I will bring the forms, she said stiffly, then turned and walked away, her heels clicking a sharp retreat against the floor. Keanu sat back down, and Ren looked at him with wide eyes. You did not have to do that. We cannot pay you back. We do not have anything. I know, he said simply. Then why? The question came out raw, confused. You do not know us. I stole from you. Why would you help us? Keanu was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer. Because I can, he said finally. Because right now, your mother needs help, and I am in a position to give it. That is reason enough. Ren stared at him, searching his face for some hidden motive, some catch she had missed. When she found none, something in her expression shifted. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of it. The first crack in the wall she had built around herself. Before either of them could say more, a doctor emerged from the treatment area. He was middle-aged, with gray streaking his dark hair and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much suffering and kept showing up anyway. His scrubs were slightly rumpled, and he moved with the purposeful stride of a man who had no time to waste. Family of Rosalind Holloway, he asked, looking between them. Ren jumped to her feet. That is my mom. Is she okay? Is she going to be all right? The doctor, whose badge read Dr. Emmett Navarro, gestured for them to sit back down. He pulled over a chair and sat facing them, his expression serious but not unkind. We have stabilized her for now, he began. But I need to be honest with you about the situation. Her kidney function is severely compromised. The disease has progressed further than we initially thought. She needs dialysis immediately, and she will need it regularly going forward. 3 times a week, at minimum. Ren's face crumpled. But she will live, right? She is going to be okay. Dr. Navarro chose his words carefully. We are going to do everything we can. The dialysis will help filter the toxins from her blood that her kidneys cannot remove on their own. But this is a serious condition, and recovery will take time. She is going to need a lot of support. I can take care of her, Ren said quickly. I have been taking care of her. I can do it. The doctor looked at this child, this girl who had already shouldered burdens no child should have to carry, and something softened in his clinical demeanor. I know you have been very brave. But your mother is going to need more than one person can provide. There will be treatments, medications, lifestyle changes. It is a lot to manage. She will have help, Keanu said quietly. Both Ren and the doctor turned to look at him. Whatever she needs, she will have it. Dr. Navarro studied him for a moment, then nodded. Good, that is good to hear. I will have the nurses keep you updated. The first dialysis session should be finished in about 2 hours. After that, if all goes well, she should be awake and able to see visitors. He stood, offered Ren a small, encouraging smile, and disappeared back through the doors. Ren sank into her chair, relief and fear and exhaustion warring on her face. She looked utterly drained, like a candle that had burned down to its last inch of wick. Keanu wished he could do more, say something that would make the waiting easier, but he knew there were no words for moments like this. so he simply sat with her, a quiet presence in the storm. That was when the police arrived. Two officers walked into the emergency room, their uniforms crisp, their expressions alert. One was older, stocky, with thinning hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent decades on the force. The other was younger, tall, and lean, with the slightly uncertain energy of someone still learning the job. They were led by a hospital security guard who pointed in Keanu and Ren's direction. The older officer approached first. "Mr. Keanu Reeves," he asked. Keanu stood slowly. "Yes." "Can I have an officer?" Whose badge identified him as Officer Brandt, pulled out a small notebook. "We received a report earlier today about a theft. A wallet taken from a pedestrian in the commercial district. A witness provided a description of the suspect, and we were able to track her through street cameras to this location." His eyes moved to Ren, who had gone very still. "This young lady matches the description. We need to take her in for questioning." Ren's face went pale. "I gave it back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I gave it back. I did not keep anything." The younger officer, Mullins, stepped forward. "Miss, we just need you to come with us to the station. Answer a few questions. Clear everything up. The matter has been resolved," Keanu said, positioning himself slightly between the officers and Ren. She returned the wallet. Everything was still in it. "I have no intention of pressing charges." Brandt shook his head. "With respect, sir, that is not entirely your decision. We have procedures to follow. The girl has a prior warning for shoplifting from 2 months ago. Given that history, we are obligated to investigate further." Ren's voice cracked. "That was different. I only took food that time because we had not eaten in 2 days. I am not a thief. I am not." Mullins reached for the handcuffs on his belt. "We will sort all of that out at the station. Please come with us." Keanu stepped forward, his voice hardening. "You are not putting handcuffs on her." Brandt raised an eyebrow. "Sir, it is standard procedure for—" "She is 12 years old." Keanu cut in. "She is not armed. She is not violent. Her mother is in the ICU fighting for her life, and you want to drag her out of here in handcuffs." "No." The two officers exchanged a glance. Mullins's hand hovered near the cuffs, but did not move. Keanu continued, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. "I am declaring myself her temporary guardian. If you want to question her, you can do it here, with me present. If you want to press charges, go ahead and file the paperwork. But I will have the best attorney in Los Angeles on this case within the hour. And I will personally ensure that every reporter in this city knows that the LAPD handcuffed a crying child in a hospital while her mother was on a dialysis machine." Silence stretched between them. Brandt's jaw tightened. He was not a bad man. Keanu could see that. He was just a man doing his job, following rules that had not been designed with compassion in mind. Finally, Brandt let out a long breath. "We will wait," he said. "But we are not leaving until we get some answers." "Then wait," Keanu replied. "But you wait over there, and you leave her alone." The officers retreated to a spot near the entrance, where they could watch without looming. Keanu turned back to Ren, who was shaking, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "It is okay," he said, kneeling down so he was at her eye level. "They are not going to take you anywhere. I promise." "I am sorry," she whispered, the words tumbling out between sobs. "I am so sorry. I did not mean to cause all this trouble. I just wanted to help my mom. I did not know what else to do." Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "You did what you thought you had to do for someone you love. That does not make you a bad person, Ren. It makes you human." She looked at him, her eyes red and swollen, searching for something she desperately needed to find. "Do you really believe that?" "I do," he said simply. "Now take a breath. Your mom is going to need you to be strong when she wakes up." Ren nodded slowly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She took a shaky breath, then another, forcing herself back from the edge of panic. Keanu stood and stepped a few feet away, pulling out his phone. He found the contact he needed and pressed call. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Keanu? It is late. Everything all right? Theo, I need your help. He kept his voice low, glancing back at Ren to make sure she was okay. There is a situation. A young girl named Ren Holloway. She took my wallet earlier today, but she returned it, and I am not pressing charges. The police are here anyway, talking about priors and investigations. I need you to make sure this does not turn into something that follows her for the rest of her life. Theodore Langston, his attorney and friend of many years, was quiet for a moment. What is her story? Her mother is in the hospital with kidney failure. They have been living in a slum apartment, barely surviving. The landlord has been harassing them, possibly breaking several housing codes. The girl was desperate. She made a mistake. I see. There was the sound of papers rustling. Give me the details on the landlord. Name, address, anything you have. Vernon Cates, building in East Compton. I saw exposed wiring, water damage, mold on the walls. The place is a hazard. And today he threatened to throw them out on the street. I will start looking into it first thing tomorrow. As for the girl, I will make some calls tonight. If the police want to pursue this, they will have to go through me. Thank you, Theo. Do not mention it. Just, Keanu, be careful. Getting involved in situations like this can get complicated. I know, Keanu said quietly. But sometimes complicated is the only option. He ended the call and returned to Ren, who was staring at the clock on the wall, counting the minutes until she could see her mother again. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Keanu remained beside Ren, sometimes talking quietly, sometimes sitting in companionable silence. He bought her a sandwich from the vending machine, which she ate mechanically, barely tasting it. He draped his leather jacket over her shoulders when she started to shiver, and she pulled it tight around herself, like armor against the cold uncertainty. Finally, nearly 2 hours after the dialysis had begun, Dr. Navarro emerged once more. His expression was less grim than before, and Ren was on her feet instantly. The first dialysis session is complete, he said. Her vitals have improved significantly. She is awake now, and she has been asking for her daughter. Ren looked at Keanu, a question in her eyes. He nodded. Go. I will be here. She rushed toward the doors, then stopped and turned back. Will you come too? Just to the door. I do not want to go alone. Keanu hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He followed her through the corridor, past rooms filled with beeping machines and quiet suffering, until they reached a door near the end of the hall. Through the small window, he could see Rosalind lying in the bed, pale and fragile, connected to monitors that traced the rhythm of her struggling heart. Ren pushed the door open and stepped inside. Keanu remained at the threshold, watching through the glass. Rosalind's eyes were open, clouded with exhaustion but unmistakably alive. When she saw her daughter, her cracked lips curved into a weak smile. Ren, she whispered, her voice barely audible. My baby girl. Ren crossed the room in 3 quick steps and fell to her knees beside the bed, grabbing her mother's hand with both of hers. The tears she had been holding back finally broke free, streaming down her face in silent rivers. Mom, she sobbed, pressing her forehead against their joined hands. I thought I lost you. I thought you were going to leave me. Rosalind lifted her other hand, trembling with effort, and placed it on her daughter's head. Her fingers moved slowly through Ren's tangled curls, a gesture of comfort that seemed to cost her every ounce of strength she had left. I am still here, she said softly. I am not going anywhere, baby. I promised you, remember? I promised I would never leave you. Ren looked up, her face streaked with tears. I was so scared, Mom. I did not know what to do. I tried to get money for your medicine, but I made a mistake. I did something bad. Rosalind's brow furrowed with concern, but she did not let go of her daughter's hand. Whatever you did, we will figure it out. Together, we always do. There is a man, Ren continued, glancing toward the door where Keanu stood watching. He helped us. He is paying for everything. He stayed with me the whole time. Rosalind followed her daughter's gaze, her eyes finding Keanu through the window. She studied him for a long moment, this stranger who had appeared in their lives like an unexpected answer to a prayer she had stopped believing in. There was no recognition in her eyes, just wary gratitude and a flicker of something that might have been hope. Keanu gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that asked for nothing in return. Then he stepped back from the door, giving the mother and daughter the privacy they needed. He returned to the waiting area, where the two officers still sat watching. He walked over to them, reaching into his pocket to pull out a business card. "This is my attorney's information," he said, handing it to Brant. "He will be in touch with your precinct tomorrow. I am confirming, in writing if you need it, that I do not wish to press charges regarding the wallet." The girl returned it with everything intact. "As far as I am concerned, the matter is closed." Brant looked at the card, then back at Keanu. "And you are taking responsibility for her. For as long as she needs it." The officer studied him for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. It was not quite approval, but it was close. Finally, he pocketed the card and nodded to his partner. "We will be going, then. But if there are any further incidents, there will not be," Keanu said. The two officers walked out into the night, and the weight in the waiting room lifted just slightly. About 20 minutes later, Ren emerged from the corridor. Her eyes were still red from crying, but there was something different about her now. A lightness, perhaps. The first breath after nearly drowning, she walked over to Keanu and sat down in the chair beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "She looks so weak," Ren said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "But she smiled at me. She held my hand and told me we would be okay?" Keanu nodded. "That is good. That is very good. The police left." "They did. My lawyer will handle the rest. You do not have to worry about that anymore." She was quiet again, processing. Then, in a voice so soft he almost missed it, she said, "Thank you. For everything. I still do not understand why you are doing this, but thank you." Keanu looked at her. This girl who had been through more in 12 years than most people faced in a lifetime. "You do not need to understand it right now. You just need to know that you are not alone anymore. Whatever comes next, we will figure it out together." Ren nodded, a small motion, but it carried the weight of something important. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. Outside, the night had fully descended on Los Angeles, the city lights glittering like scattered stars against the darkness. Inside the hospital, machines beeped and footsteps echoed, and life continued its delicate balancing act between fragility and resilience. Keanu leaned back in his chair, his jacket now wrapped around Ren's shoulders, exhaustion finally catching up with him. But he did not leave. He stayed right there, in that uncomfortable plastic seat, keeping watch over a girl who had no one else. And in the ICU, Rosalind drifted into sleep with her daughter's face still fresh in her mind, not knowing that when morning came, the world would be different. Not fixed, not perfect, but different. Because a stranger had chosen to stay when he could have walked away. And sometimes, that made all the difference. The days that followed moved with a strange, suspended rhythm, like the world had slowed down to give everyone time to catch their breath. 3 days after the emergency, Rosalind was transferred from the intensive care unit to a regular hospital room. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. She was still weak, her body worn thin by years of neglect and the sudden trauma of kidney failure. The dialysis sessions, 3 times a week, left her exhausted and pale. But she could sit up now. She could talk. She could hold her daughter's hand and tell her that everything would be okay, even if neither of them was entirely sure that was true. Keanu came to visit every day. At first, his visits were brief. He would stop by in the late afternoon, ask how Rosalind was feeling, exchange a few words with Ren, and then leave. But as the days passed, the visits grew longer. He started bringing things. Food from a nearby restaurant, because he had learned that hospital meals were barely edible. Books for Rosalind, novels with worn covers that he found at a second-hand shop near his home. Small gifts for Ren, a set of colored pencils, a sketchbook, a small stuffed bear with a crooked smile that she pretended she was too old for, but kept on her pillow anyway. Rosalind did not know what to make of him. She had spent her entire adult life learning that nothing came for free. Every kindness had a price. Every helping hand eventually demanded something in return. It was the way the world worked, at least the world she had known. So when this stranger, this man who had appeared out of nowhere and paid her medical bills and sat in the waiting room for hours while her daughter slept, kept coming back day after day without asking for anything, she did not know how to respond. She watched him carefully, looking for the catch, looking for the moment when the mask would slip and his true intentions would reveal themselves. But days passed, and then a week, and still he asked for nothing. He just showed up, quiet and steady, like a tide that kept returning no matter how many times it was pushed away. One afternoon, about a week after she had been moved to the regular room, Ren went downstairs to the cafeteria to get some water. It was just the two of them now, Rosalind in her bed and Keanu in the chair by the window, a paperback book open on his knee. "I do not understand you," Rosalind said suddenly. Keanu looked up, surprised by the directness in her voice. "I am sorry. I do not understand what you want." She shifted in her bed, wincing slightly at the movement. "You pay for my treatment. You bring gifts for my daughter. You come here every single day. Why? What do you get out of this?" Keanu closed his book and set it aside. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the window at the city below, at the cars and people moving through their ordinary lives, oblivious to the conversations happening in hospital rooms above them. "When I was young," he said finally, "my mother worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. There were nights when we did not know if we would have enough to eat the next day. I remember what that felt like. The fear, the uncertainty, the way it makes you feel like the whole world is against you." Rosalind was quiet, listening. "I got lucky," Keanu continued. "I found my way out. I built a life where I never have to worry about money again. But I never forgot where I came from, and I never forgot the people who helped us when we had nothing." He turned to look at her, his eyes calm and sincere. "I am not here because I think you need to be saved, Rosalind. I am here because I can help, and I want to help. There are no conditions, no expectations. Just one person trying to make things a little easier for another." Rosalind studied his face for a long moment, searching for deception and finding none. Her eyes grew wet, though she blinked the tears away before they could fall. "I have spent my whole life being suspicious of kindness," she said softly. "It is hard to believe it when someone offers it without wanting something back." "I know," Keanu said, "but maybe this time you can let yourself believe it. Just a little." She did not respond, but something in her expression shifted. The wall she had built around herself, the one that kept everyone at arm's length, developed a small crack. Not much, but enough. The next day, Keanu drove to East Compton. Ren had mentioned, almost in passing, that there were things she missed from the apartment. Her school books. Some clothes that still fit. A photograph of her family from when her father was still alive, the only picture she had left of him. She had tried to sound casual about it, but Keanu had seen the longing in her eyes, so he went to get them. The neighborhood looked even worse in the daylight than it had that first evening. The buildings sagged with neglect, their walls stained by years of pollution and indifference. Trash collected in the gutters. A group of young men sat on a corner, watching him pass with expressions that were neither hostile nor welcoming, just wary. Keanu parked near the building and made his way to the back entrance, the same faded green door he had walked through days ago. He climbed the stairs to the third floor, his footsteps echoing in the dim hallway, and turned toward the apartment. That was when he saw it. The door was open, not just unlocked, but hanging ajar, the frame splintered where someone had forced it. And in the hallway, scattered like debris from an explosion, were the contents of the apartment. Clothes lay in crumpled heaps on the floor. Pots and pans had been thrown against the wall, some of them dented beyond use. Books had been ripped and tossed aside. A small mattress leaned against the railing, its fabric torn. And amid the chaos, a single photograph lay face down on the ground, its glass frame shattered. Keanu stood very still, taking it all in. Then, slowly, he pulled out his phone and began to document everything. He photographed the broken door, the scattered belongings, the destruction that had been deliberately, almost gleefully, inflicted on the meager possessions of a woman and her child. He photographed the new lock that had been installed on the door, a heavy padlock that made it clear no one was welcome back. He also photographed the apartment itself, the violations he had noticed during his first visit. The exposed wiring near the kitchen, the black mold spreading across the wall by the window, the water stains on the ceiling that spoke of leaks never repaired, the cracked electrical outlet that was a fire waiting to happen. A door creaked open behind him. He turned to see an elderly woman peering out from the apartment across the hall, the same woman who had watched him with suspicion during his first visit. But now her expression was different. There was anger in her eyes, and beneath that, a weary resignation. "He came this morning," she said, her voice raspy with age. "Vern brought 2 men with him. They threw everything out and changed the locks. Said anyone who could not pay did not deserve a roof." Keanu lowered his phone. "Did anyone call the police?" The woman let out a bitter laugh. "The police. They do not come here unless someone is dead. And even then, they take their time." She shook her head. "That man has been terrorizing this building for years, rising rents, refusing to fix anything, threatening anyone who complains. We are all trapped here because we have nowhere else to go. Would you be willing to testify to that?" Keanu asked. "If it came to court." The woman hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. Then she straightened her thin shoulders and nodded. "I have been afraid of that man for too long. Someone needs to stop him. If you are willing to try, then yes. I will tell them everything I know." Keanu thanked her and took her name and apartment number. Then he called Theo. "Vernon moved faster than I expected," he said when his attorney answered. "He broke into the apartment and threw all their belongings into the hallway, changed the locks. The place looks like a war zone." Theo's voice was sharp with professional anger. "That is textbook illegal eviction. In California, a landlord cannot remove a tenant's property or change locks without a court order. He just handed us the case on a silver platter." "There is more," Keanu continued. "I have photographs of multiple housing code violations, exposed wiring, mold, water damage, structural issues. And I have a neighbor willing to testify that he has been intimidating tenants for years." "Good. Send me everything. I will file a complaint with the housing authority and prepare a civil suit. If what you are telling me is accurate, Vernon Cates is going to face serious consequences." Keanu ended the call and spent the next hour salvaging what he could from the wreckage. Most of it was beyond saving, but he managed to find a few of Ren's clothes, some school supplies, and buried beneath a pile of broken dishes, the photograph she had asked about. The frame was destroyed, but the picture itself was intact. A young couple smiling at the camera, holding a baby between them. A family that had once been whole. He tucked it carefully into his jacket and left. That evening, he did not tell Ren what had happened. Not yet. She had enough to worry about. Instead, he focused on the next step, finding them somewhere safe to live. He contacted a nonprofit organization that helped families in housing crisis. Through them, he found a small apartment in Inglewood, A neighborhood that was safer, cleaner, and closer to both the hospital and a good public school. The apartment was nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living room with windows that let in actual sunlight. But it was clean, it was safe, and it was available. Keanu paid 6 months of rent in advance, routing the payment through the charity to avoid drawing attention to himself. He also arranged for basic furniture to be delivered: beds, a table, chairs, a small sofa. Nothing extravagant, just enough to make it feel like a home. He did not tell Rosalind or Wren about any of this. He wanted it to be ready when they were. A few nights later, Keanu sat in his usual chair by Rosalind's hospital bed. She had fallen asleep early, exhausted from the day's dialysis session, her breathing slow and steady beneath the thin hospital blanket. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping of the monitors. Wren sat on the small couch by the window, her sketchbook open on her lap. She had been drawing something, but now the pencil lay still in her hand, and she was staring out at the city lights with an expression that was older than her years. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, not looking at him. Keanu set down the book he had been pretending to read. Of course. She was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I want to apologize to you. Really apologize. Not just about the wallet. You already apologized for that," Keanu said gently. Wren shook her head. "No, I need to apologize for something else. For how I thought about you." She finally turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "When I saw you on the street that day, I did not see a person. I just saw someone rich. Someone who had everything while we had nothing. I thought taking from you would not matter because you had so much. I told myself you probably would not even notice." Keanu listened without interrupting. "But I was wrong," Wren continued. "I judged you without knowing anything about you. I decided who you were based on your clothes, your watch, the neighborhood you were walking through. And that was not fair. You are not the person I thought you were. You are kind and patient, and you have done more for us than anyone ever has. And I am sorry for assuming the worst about you just because you have money." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Keanu let them settle before responding. "Can I tell you something too?" he asked. Wren nodded. "When I was chasing you through those alleys, I made assumptions about you too. I saw a kid in a hoodie who had stolen my wallet, and I thought I knew exactly what kind of person you were. A thief, a troublemaker. Someone who took things that did not belong to her because she did not care about right and wrong." He paused, holding her gaze. "I never stopped to wonder why you did it. I never considered that you might be desperate, or scared, or trying to save someone you loved. I just saw what I wanted to see." Wren's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the admission. "We both judged each other," Keanu said. "Why both looked at the surface and thought we understood the whole story. But people are more complicated than that. Everyone has struggles you cannot see. Everyone has reasons for the things they do, even when those things are wrong." He leaned forward slightly. "The lesson here is not just for you, Wren. It is for both of us. Never judge someone by a single moment or a single action. Everyone deserves the chance to show who they really are." Wren was quiet for a long time, turning his words over in her mind. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I will remember that," she said softly. "I promise." They sat together in comfortable silence after that, watching the lights of the city flicker and glow. Rosalind slept on, unaware of the conversation that had just taken place. And somewhere in that quiet hospital room, a bond was strengthening, built not on obligation or gratitude, but on mutual understanding and shared truth. 2 weeks after she had been admitted, Rosalind was discharged from Harbor General. She was still weak, still dependent on dialysis 3 times a week. But the doctors were cautiously optimistic. With proper treatment and care, she could live a relatively normal life. It would not be easy, but it was possible. Keanu picked them up in a rented car. Nothing flashy, just practical. Ren sat in the back, practically vibrating with nervous energy, while Rosalind sat in the front, her hands folded in her lap, trying not to let her anxiety show. "Where are we going?" Rosalind asked as they drove. "I need to figure out what to do about the apartment." "Vernon, probably." "There is something I need to tell you," Keanu said, keeping his voice calm. "Vernon emptied your apartment a few days ago. He threw your belongings into the hallway and changed the locks." Rosalind's face went pale. "What? He cannot do that. We have rights." "He cannot, and he will face consequences for it. My attorney is already handling the case." Keanu glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "But you cannot go back there. It is not safe, and legally it is complicated." "Then where—" Rosalind's voice trailed off, fear creeping in. "I found you a new place," Keanu said. "It is in Inglewood, small, but clean. Safe neighborhood, close to the hospital and a good school for Ren. The rent is taken care of for the next 6 months." Rosalind opened her mouth to protest, to say that she could not accept this, that it was too much. But something stopped her. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the look on her daughter's face in the rearview mirror, hope and fear tangled together. Or maybe it was the memory of their conversation in the hospital room and the crack in the wall around her heart that had grown just a little wider. "I do not know how to thank you," she said finally, her voice thick. "You do not have to," Keanu replied. "Just focus on getting better." They drove the rest of the way in silence, the city scrawling past the windows like a film reel of someone else's life. When they finally pulled up to the apartment building in Inglewood, it looked almost too ordinary to be real. Clean walls, trimmed hedges, a small playground visible in the courtyard. Keanu led them up to the second floor and unlocked the door. When it swung open, Rosalind and Ren stood frozen on the threshold. The apartment was modest by any standard. But after years of living in a cramped, moldy, falling, apart room in East Compton, it looked like a palace. Sunlight streamed through the windows, falling across a small living room furnished with a comfortable sofa and a wooden coffee table. The kitchen was clean and bright, with appliances that actually worked. And down the short hallway, 2 bedrooms waited, one for Rosalind and one, for the first time in her life, just for Ren. "This is ours," Ren whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might break the spell. "It is yours," Keanu confirmed. Ren walked through the apartment slowly, touching the walls, opening closet doors, looking out the windows at the quiet street below. When she reached the second bedroom and saw the small bed made up with fresh sheets and a pillow, she turned back to Keanu with tears streaming down her face. "I have never had my own room before," she said. Keanu smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Now you do." Rosalind had not moved from the doorway. She stood there, one hand pressed against her chest, the other gripping the door frame, as if she might collapse without its support. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks, and she made no effort to wipe them away. "I do not know what to say," she managed. "I have spent so long fighting just to survive. I forgot what it felt like to have someone in my corner." Keanu walked over to her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You do not have to fight alone anymore. Not today. Not tomorrow. Just rest. Heal. Let someone else carry the weight for a while." She looked at him, this stranger who had become something more, and nodded slowly. It was not surrender. It was acceptance. The first step toward believing that maybe, just maybe, life could be different. Keanu stayed long enough to make sure they were settled, then excused himself to give them privacy. As he walked to his car, he heard footsteps behind him. Keanu, wait. He turned to find Ren running toward him. She stopped a few feet away, slightly out of breath. "I just wanted to say—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "Thank you is not enough. But it is all I have. So thank you. For everything." Keanu looked at her, at this girl who had been through so much and still found the strength to keep going. "You are going to be okay," Ren, both of you. I believe that. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I believe it too. Now, he climbed into his car and drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as Ren walked back toward the building, toward her new home, toward a future that finally held a glimmer of hope. But Keanu knew the story was not over. Vernon Cates was still out there, and there would be a reckoning. Justice moved slowly, but it moved nonetheless. And when the time came, he would be there to make sure Rosalind and Wren were protected. For now, though, they had what they needed most. A safe place, a chance to breathe, and the knowledge that they were no longer alone. Nearly a year had passed since that afternoon on the streets of Los Angeles, when a stolen wallet had set in motion a chain of events that none of them could have predicted. The seasons had turned, the calendar pages had fallen away, and life had slowly, carefully, begun to rebuild itself from the wreckage of what had been. Wren started school in the fall. The public school in Inglewood was nothing like the places she had attended before, where overcrowded classrooms and underfunded programs had made learning feel like an afterthought. This school had books that were not falling apart. It had teachers who remembered students' names. It had windows that let in actual sunlight and a cafeteria that served food that did not come from cans. She had been accepted through an education assistance program, one of the many charitable organizations that Keanu had quietly supported over the years. The scholarship covered tuition, supplies, and even a small allowance for clothes. Wren did not know the connection. She did not need to. What mattered was that she had a chance, a real chance, to build something different for herself. The first day was terrifying. She stood outside the entrance in her new clothes, simple but clean, a plain backpack slung over one shoulder. Around her, other students streamed past in designer sneakers and expensive jackets, phones in hand, laughing and chatting with the easy confidence of those who had never known want. Wren felt their eyes on her, curious and assessing, and she fought the urge to turn around and run. But she did not run. She squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked through the doors. The first week was harder than she had expected. She kept to herself mostly, eating lunch alone in a corner of the cafeteria, speaking only when spoken to. She was not unfriendly, just cautious. Years of survival had taught her to observe before engaging, to measure people before trusting them. Then Preston appeared. He was the kind of boy who had never been told no, whose parents' money had insulated him from consequence, and whose sense of entitlement radiated from him like heat from a fire. He wore clothes that cost more than Wren's entire wardrobe, and he made sure everyone knew it. He walked through the halls like he owned them, because in his mind, he probably did. It was a Thursday afternoon, a week into the school year, when he decided to make Wren his target. She was sitting in the classroom before the bell rang, reviewing her notes for the biology test, when Preston walked over with two of his friends flanking him like bodyguards. He stopped in front of her desk, arms crossed, a smirk on his face. "Hey," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "I heard something interesting about you." Wren looked up but did not respond. She could feel the other students turning to watch, could sense the shift in the room's energy as attention focused on the confrontation. "I heard you got adopted by some rich celebrity or something." Preston continued, his voice dripping with mockery. "What is the deal? Are you like his charity case? How much did he pay you to play the poor little orphan girl?" A few students laughed nervously. Others stayed silent, watching to see what would happen. Wren felt her face flush hot. Her stomach churned, and for a moment, all she wanted to do was disappear, to shrink into herself and become invisible, the way she had learned to do in East Compton when attention meant danger. But then she remembered something, a conversation in a hospital room, late at night, when the world had felt like it was falling apart. A man sitting beside her, speaking quietly about judgment and assumptions and the danger of seeing only the surface of things. Never judge someone by a single moment or a single action, he had said. Everyone deserves the chance to show who they really are. Wren took a slow breath. She looked up at Preston, meeting his eyes directly. "I am not ashamed of my mother," she said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "She worked hard every single day, even when she was sick, to give me a chance at a life. She fought for me when no one else would. She is the strongest person I know." Preston's smirk faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Whatever. She is still just some poor woman who could not even pay her bills." Wren stood up from her desk, bringing herself to eye level with him. "And what about you?" she asked quietly. "What have you ever done to deserve everything you have? You were born into money. You did not earn it. You did not fight for it. It was just handed to you. So, before you judge me for where I come from, maybe ask yourself what you would be without your parents' bank account." The room went completely silent. Preston opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He stood there, stunned, unable to find words to counter what she had said. His friends shifted uncomfortably behind him, suddenly eager to be anywhere else. From across the room, a girl with braided hair and kind eyes caught Wren's gaze. She smiled and gave a small nod of approval. Her name, Wren would later learn, was Iris. The bell rang, breaking the moment. Preston retreated to his seat without another word, his face red with humiliation. And Wren sat back down, her hands trembling slightly but her head held high. After that day, Preston never bothered her again. He avoided her in the hallways, looked away when their eyes accidentally met. The power he had tried to wield over her had crumbled in the face of her quiet dignity, and he had no idea how to rebuild it. Wren made friends. Slowly, cautiously, but genuinely. Iris became her closest companion, a girl who had her own struggles and her own stories, but who never let them define her. They studied together, ate lunch together, and gradually, Wren began to feel something she had not felt in years. She began to feel like she belonged. Her grades improved steadily. She discovered a love for biology, fascinated by the intricate systems that kept living things alive. When her teacher asked the class to write about their future goals, Wren wrote about becoming a nurse. She wanted to help people the way the doctors and nurses at Harbor General had helped her mother. She wanted to give back some of what had been given to her. While Wren was finding her footing in her new life, justice was slowly grinding forward in the courts of Los Angeles. Vernon Cates had not gone quietly. Furious at losing his tenants and convinced that he was the victim of some grand conspiracy, he had filed a lawsuit against Rosalind, demanding payment for the 3 months of rent she had allegedly owed before being illegally removed from his property. He had hired a lawyer, a cheap one who took cases like this on contingency, and he had prepared to make an example of the woman who had dared to challenge him. He had not counted on Theodore Langston. The hearing was held on a gray Tuesday morning in the Los Angeles County Civil Court. Rosalind arrived early, dressed in a simple but neat outfit that Wren had helped her pick out the night before. She was nervous, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, but she held herself with a quiet dignity that belied her fear. Keanu was there too, sitting in the gallery behind her, a silent presence of support. He had offered to stay away if she preferred, not wanting to turn the proceedings into a media circus. But Rosalind had asked him to come. She said she felt braver knowing he was there. Vernon sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, his face set in a permanent scowl. He kept glancing at Keanu with undisguised hostility, as if trying to intimidate him through sheer force of will. It was not working. Theodore Langston rose to address the court. He was a tall man with silver hair and the calm, measured demeanor of someone who had spent decades navigating the complexities of the legal system. He laid out the case methodically, each piece of evidence building on the last like bricks in a wall. "Your Honor," he began, "Mr. Cates has filed this lawsuit claiming that my client owes him 3 months of back rent. but the evidence will show that Mr. Cates himself violated the terms of the lease agreement by failing to maintain the property in a habitable condition. He presented photographs. The exposed wiring that posed a fire hazard. The black mold spreading across the walls. The water damage from leaks that had never been repaired. The broken window that would not close. Each image was accompanied by an official report from the Los Angeles Housing Authority, documenting violations that should have been addressed years ago. Furthermore, Langston continued, Mr. Cates engaged in what California law clearly defines as illegal eviction. Without obtaining a court order, without following any of the required legal procedures, he entered my client's apartment, removed her belongings, and changed the locks. He did this while she was hospitalized, unable to defend herself or protect her property. He called the elderly neighbor to the stand. The woman, whose name was Edna, testified about years of intimidation and neglect. She described how Vernon had threatened tenants who complained, how he had raised rents without making improvements, how he had created an atmosphere of fear that kept people silent. Vernon's lawyer attempted to cross-examine, but his arguments were weak, built on technicalities rather than substance. The judge listened with growing impatience, her expression making clear that she was not impressed. When the testimony concluded, the judge did not need long to deliberate. Mr. Cates, she said, her voice firm and authoritative, the evidence presented in this courtroom paints a disturbing picture of negligence and abuse of power. You failed in your basic obligations as a landlord. You subjected your tenants to unsafe living conditions. And when one of them became too sick to fight back, you took the opportunity to remove her from her home through means that are clearly illegal under California law. Vernon's face went red. He started to rise from his seat, his lawyer tugging at his sleeve in a futile attempt to restrain him. This is ridiculous. Vernon sputtered. She owed me money. I have every right to collect what I am owed. The judge's eyes narrowed. Mr. Cates, I strongly suggest you sit down and remain silent, unless you wish to add contempt of court to your growing list of problems. Vernon glared but complied, sinking back into his chair with barely contained fury. Here is my ruling. The judge continued. The plaintiff's claim for back rent is dismissed. The evidence shows that Mr. Cates breached the lease agreement by failing to maintain habitable conditions, which under California law relieves the tenant of the obligation to pay full rent. Additionally, I am ordering Mr. Cates to compensate Ms. Holloway for the value of the personal property that was damaged or destroyed during his illegal eviction. The amount will be determined in a subsequent hearing. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the Housing Authority for further investigation. Based on what I have seen today, there may be grounds for significant fines and potential revocation of Mr. Cates's rental license. I trust that the appropriate agencies will handle this matter with the seriousness it deserves. She struck her gavel. Court is adjourned. The room erupted in murmurs. Rosaline sat frozen for a moment, unable to believe what had just happened. Then Wren, who had been sitting beside Keanu in the gallery, rushed forward and threw her arms around her mother. They held each other, tears streaming down both their faces. Vernon stormed out of the courtroom, his lawyer hurrying after him, but he did not get far before he found Keanu standing in his path, just outside the doors. Get out of my way, Vernon snarled. Keanu did not move. I think we need to have a conversation. I have nothing to say to you. Vernon's voice was low and venomous. You think you are some kind of hero, coming in here, ruining my business, making me look like a criminal. For what? A woman who could not pay her bills and a kid who steals wallets. Keanu looked at him with an expression that was neither angry nor triumphant. It was something closer to pity. You did this to yourself, Vernon. You had tenants who trusted you to provide them with safe homes. Instead, you let them live in squalor and threatened them when they complained. You treated people like they were nothing, like their lives did not matter as long as you got your rent check. And when one of them got sick and could not fight back, you threw her belongings into the street like garbage. Vernon's jaw tightened. You do not know anything about my life, about what it takes to survive in this business. I know plenty about survival, Keanu said quietly. But survival does not mean you get to crush everyone beneath you. Money does not give you the right to treat people like they are worthless. And sooner or later, the way you treat others comes back to you. Vernon stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. This is not over. You think a judge's ruling is going to stop me? I have been doing this for 20 years. I know how to work the system. Keanu did not flinch. Maybe you did. But things are different now. Your tenants know their rights. They have seen what happens when someone stands up to you, and they are not going to stay silent anymore. He paused, letting the words land. You should have treated people better, Vernon. It would have cost you nothing, and it would have saved you everything. He turned and walked away, leaving Vernon standing alone on the courthouse steps, his empire of intimidation crumbling around him. Nearly 11 months after the day they first met, Keanu returned to Inglewood. It was a Saturday afternoon in late summer, the kind of day when the California sun painted everything in shades of gold. He parked his car on the quiet street and walked up to the apartment building, a modest place that somehow looked warmer and more inviting than it had the first time he had seen it. He climbed the stairs to the second floor and knocked on the door. Wren answered almost immediately, her face breaking into a wide smile when she saw him. You came, she said, stepping aside to let him in. The apartment had been transformed. What had once been bare walls and basic furniture now felt like a home. Fresh flowers sat in a vase on the coffee table. Wren's drawings, colorful and hopeful, were taped to the walls. A small bookshelf held novels and textbooks, and on the windowsill, a tiny plant was reaching toward the light. In the corner near the window, Keanu noticed something new. A small sewing machine sat on a sturdy table, surrounded by neatly organized spools of thread and folded fabrics. Finished pieces hung on a rack nearby, simple but well-made garments that spoke of careful, patient work. Rosalind emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked better than Keanu had ever seen her. Still thin, still marked by the years of struggle, but there was color in her cheeks now, and light in her eyes that had not been there before. The dialysis sessions continued 3 times a week, a permanent part of her life now, but she had learned to work around them. The sewing had started as a way to pass the time during recovery, but word had spread through the neighborhood, and now she had a small but steady stream of customers who brought her alterations and simple repairs. It is not much, she had told Wren once, but it is honest work, and it is mine. Keanu, Rosalind said warmly, crossing the room to greet him. Thank you for coming. Please, sit down. I made tea. They sat together in the small living room, and Wren could not contain her excitement. She pulled out her report card, practically vibrating with pride as she showed him her grades. Mostly A's, a few B's, and a special commendation from her biology teacher. She says I have real potential, Wren said, her eyes shining. She thinks I could get into a good college if I keep working hard. I have no doubt about that, Keanu said, genuine warmth in his voice. What do you want to study? Nursing, Wren said without hesitation. I want to help people like the doctors and nurses help my mom. I want to be there for families like ours, people who do not have anyone else to turn to. Keanu looked at her, at this girl who had once been so desperate that she had stolen a stranger's wallet, and felt something swell in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or hope, or simply the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, against all odds, things could turn out right. You are going to be amazing, he said. I believe that with all my heart. Rosalind set down her tea and looked at Keanu with an expression that held 1,000 unspoken words. I have been trying to figure out how to say this, she began, her voice thick with emotion. But there are not enough words in any language to thank you properly. You did not just save my life. You gave my daughter hope. You showed her that there are still good people in this world, people who help without expecting anything in return. She glanced toward the sewing machine, a small smile playing at her lips. I am even earning my own money now. It is not much, but every time I finish a piece, every time a customer comes back with a smile, I feel like I am building something. Something real. Something that is mine. Keanu shook his head gently. You and Ren are the remarkable ones. You survived things that would have broken most people. You kept fighting when you had every reason to give up. I just happened to be standing in the right place at the right time. Rosalind smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Not everyone stops when they are standing in the right place. Most people just keep walking. You chose to stay. That makes all the difference. When it was time to leave, Ren walked him to the door. She stood there for a moment, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, clearly wanting to say something but struggling to find the words. Keanu, she finally said, looking up at him with eyes that were no longer those of a frightened child, but of a young woman beginning to find her way. I made you a promise once. I said that someday I would help someone the way you helped us. I am going to keep that promise, no matter what it takes. Keanu smiled and reached out to gently ruffle her hair, the way he might have done with a much younger child. She did not pull away. I know you will, he said, and I am already proud of you. Not because of your grades or your plans for the future, but because of who you are, because you took something hard and painful and turned it into strength. That takes courage, Ren. Real courage. She threw her arms around him in a tight hug, holding on for a long moment before stepping back. There were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. He nodded, gave her one last smile, and walked down the stairs. As he drove away, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the road, Keanu thought about everything that had happened. A year ago, he had been walking down a street in Los Angeles, minding his own business, when a desperate girl had collided with him and stolen his wallet. He could have called the police. He could have walked away after getting it back. He could have decided that it was not his problem. But he had not. He had followed her into an alley, then into a crumbling apartment, then into a hospital room, and finally into a courtroom. He had watched a family fight to survive and had done what he could to help them find solid ground. And in the process, he had learned something too. He had learned that wealth was not measured in bank accounts or property or possessions. It was measured in connection, in compassion, in the willingness to see another person's pain and respond with action instead of indifference. He had more money than he could ever spend, but the richest moments of the past year had been the ones that cost nothing at all. A conversation in a hospital room, a child's smile when she saw her own bedroom for the first time, a mother's tears of gratitude, a promise made and a promise kept. He turned onto the highway, the city sprawling out behind him, and allowed himself a small smile. The world was full of people carrying invisible burdens. Full of families like Rosalind and Ren, fighting battles that no one else could see. He could not help all of them. No one could. But he could help some. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. As I tell this story, I cannot help but reflect on what it teaches us. Keanu Reeves is a man who could have anything he wants. Fame, fortune, comfort beyond measure. Yet, when a desperate child stole his wallet on a crowded street, he did not respond with anger or indifference. He chose to follow. He chose to listen. He chose to see the person behind the action, and in doing so, he changed 2 lives forever. Ren Holloway was just a girl trying to save her mother. She made a mistake, a serious one, driven by desperation and love. But when given a second chance, she proved herself worthy of it. She stood up to a bully. She excelled in school. She dreamed of becoming someone who could help others the way she had been helped. Her story reminds us that people are not defined by their worst moments. They are defined by what they do next. Rosalind Holloway fought a battle that millions of people fight every day, the battle against poverty, against illness, against a system that often seems designed to keep people down. She did not give up. She kept fighting for her daughter, even when she had nothing left to give. And when she finally had a chance to rebuild, she did not wait for handouts. She picked up a needle and thread and started creating something with her own hands. Her strength was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, persistent, and unbreakable. And Vernon Cates. He learned what happens when you treat people as if they do not matter, when you use your power to intimidate and exploit instead of to help and protect. His downfall was not caused by Keanu or Theo or anyone else. It was caused by his own choices, his own cruelty, coming back to him in the end. This story is not about a rich man saving poor people. It is about human beings seeing each other. Truly seeing each other. It is about the courage to stop when everyone else would keep walking, the wisdom to listen when it would be easier to judge, and the grace to help without expecting anything in return. Here is the message I hope you take with you. Sometimes, a single act of kindness can change the entire course of a life. Not just for the person receiving it, but for the person giving it too. We never know what battles the people around us are fighting. We never know what burdens they carry or what desperation drives their choices. Before we judge, before we condemn, we should ask ourselves what we would do in their place. True wealth is not found in bank accounts or possessions. It is found in how we treat the people around us, especially those who have nothing to offer in return. It is found in compassion, in connection, in the simple act of choosing to care. And finally, every single one of us has the power to make a difference. You do not have to be famous. You do not have to be rich. You just need a heart willing to open, hands willing to help, and the courage to act when you see something that needs to be done. The world is full of wrens, children carrying weights too heavy for their small shoulders. It is full of Rosalinds, parents fighting impossible battles for the people they love. And it needs more people willing to do what Keanu did. To stop, to see, to stay. Because sometimes that is all it takes to change everything.